Alright everyone, I think it's time we finally talked about this. We need to talk about the Slayer problem. Look, if you clicked on this video, you probably already have a good idea of what we're going to be talking about today. The community has been outraged for the past month or two about Slayer specifically, talking about how overpowered the character is and how he's ruining the game and blah 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 and all of that. So I wanted to take the opportunity to actually analyze what is going on with Slayer and why everyone's talking about him, and yes, of course, why people are saying that he's such a strong character in this version of the game. If you go pretty much anywhere online, whether it's Twitter or what have you, you're going to see a ton of people talking about how strong this character is. You'll see top players placing Slayer very high on their tier list these days, and you have players like Vyrix saying how he doesn't even see a reason to play Nago anymore because Slayer is just that strong, and then Vyrix went and won a major tournament with Slayer. So, there's top players talking about how strong the character is, but even just your average Guilty Gear Strive player is talking a lot about this character. And of course, it's not like he's the only top tier character in the game. It's not like there haven't been other top tiers in the history of the game. So why is Slayer specifically being talked about so much? Today, I want to kind of look into that, as well as really highlight some of the reasons why Slayer is so strong. Because, well, I think, at this point, it's pretty accepted that Slayer is very strong. I think some of his strengths are either misunderstood or kind of looked over, so I want to go into that today. So let's do it. Let's talk about Slayer. Before we get into it though, I do want to ask down in the comments below, what do you guys think about Slayer? Do you think that he's overpowered as well? How are you feeling about like this kind of, ending time for season 3 and where everything's going? Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, consider dropping a like and subbing to the channel as well. Likes and comments, as always, really help the algorithm, so it's always super appreciated. And you're going to want to make sure you're subscribed as well, because you're not going to want to miss our future videos, especially when we start covering Season 4. Anyways, with that said, let's talk about Slayer. Now, like I said, everyone's talking about Slayer, right? And I think that something that's really important here is that in comparison to other top-tier characters who have been complained about in the past, if you look at characters like Asuka or Happy Chaos, more like technical top-tier characters, those characters tend to only truly be a problem at top-level play, whereas Slayer is being talked about by just about everybody. So why is that the case? Well, to talk about this, we're going to need to look at this website, which is going to be Puddle Farm. This is a fan-made website that is essentially like an ELO site. It will cover different, or it basically makes an ELO system out of the Strive Tower system. It's kind of worse in the back end, and more importantly, what I like to look at is the matchup section, because it actually does take into consideration all the different matchup data that goes through the game. So if we go down here to Happy Chaos, what you'll notice is that across all of the different rankings in the Strive Tower system, Happy Chaos actually doesn't win that much. In fact, he actually loses most matchups in the game according to this, right? So yeah, in a tournament setting, Happy Chaos and characters like Asuka are characters that are actually very strong when you're playing people who are, very executionally capable, is what I would say, right? Because yes, as much as it pains me to say, I have to admit that Happy Chaos is a technical character who actually does take, some effort to get good with. And because of that, when you look at something like this, which is, this is an average basically of the player base, he doesn't actually do that well across most skill levels. If we go take a look down here and look at Slayer, what you'll notice is a lot of green. There is a lot of green going on here for Slayer. And this basically implies that Slayer is winning most matchups in the tower system across different skill levels. Even if we go and limit it down to just the top 1,000 players based on this ELO site, you'll see that he is still winning most matchups in the game. So this specifically is actually a really big problem, because if a character has this level of win rate, literally winning 90+% matchups in the game across all skill levels, this is a big problem, because this means this character is negatively impacting the experience of a majority of your player base. This isn't a case like Happy Chaos or Asuka or whatever, where they're only really impacting like top level play, maybe some Celestial. This is actually impacting almost literally everybody who plays the game. And this basically boils down to the fact that Slayer is a character who is very easy to play. He's very forgiving as well, having high health, having very good buttons, and having very high damage output for very low effort. It kind of means that Slayer is a character who anyone can kind of be a threat with. right? Now, when it comes to, your lower skill levels and just like your average celestial sets and all of that, sure, the, players are probably not optimized, right? And the people fighting Slayer are probably making a lot of mistakes, naturally. I've played Slayer in Tower since I did just pick Slayer in Tower because I think it's funny. And sometimes I'm fighting people, I'm just like, you're doing insane stuff. Like, you're actually just doing insane things against Slayer and getting yourself killed. But I think what's important to recognize is that if you take two players of the same average skill, Slayer, at that skill level where people are not really great at doing their combos, they drop a little bit more often, they're not great at structuring their pressure, yada yada yada. Slayer literally just needs to do like a 3-hit combo that does like 50%, right? It's not like most other characters, even a character like Soul, who does very high damage. There's a lot more that goes on in the combo that Soul has to do, to where people are more likely to drop it, whereas Slayer is literally just like /6H pile bunker probably does like 50% of your health. And I think that's kind of the problem at hand as well, as to why Slayer is affecting most people, is just because of how simple and effective he actually is. Now, of course, this is just one part of the puzzle, right? Because as I mentioned, Slayer is also a problem even at top levels of play. We just had Virix winning a major tournament over very high level players like Serani and Leffen, as well as Razzo just winning, I believe it was DreamHack Atlanta, over some high-level players as well with Slayer. So we have 2 Slayer wins in this version of the game, and as I was mentioning, a lot of top players think that Slayer is very good. So now I want to take the time to talk about why Slayer is so good. Now, like I said, everyone kind of recognizes that Slayer is a strong character currently, right? And everyone recognizes that his reward is very high, which is definitely a part of why he's considered a strong character. It's to the point where I think a lot of people would just kind of refer to Slayer as a risk-reward character. And risk-reward is a very important thing in most fighting games, but especially Guilty Gear. Guilty Gear is a game where your ability to convert things into a meaningful situation or meaningful damage is very, very important, and is one of the biggest contributing factors to what determines if a character is even top tier in this game. And Slayer has that in spades. And like I said, everyone kind of recognizes this. So, not only is it just high damage, it's also very easy to get damage. His combos are very simple. You just do things like /6H, pile bunker, and that wall sticks, and it does 50% for no reason, right? So it's something that literally everyone can do. Like I was saying earlier, like anyone can do a Slayer combo that does 50%. And of course, off of certain counter hits, he gets very high damage. So things like counter hit 2H can be very rewarding as well. And this isn't even an optimal combo. You can do a better combo there. There's pile bunker boots. But part of the point is that you don't even have to do the fully optimal combos. You just do a ton of damage for very low effort, which also has the benefit of like a lot of these shorter combos don't build the opponent much burst or tension to be able to make comebacks with, which is very good. But beyond just Slayer's reward, I think what is kind of misunderstood about the character is it's not just his reward is high, he is exceptionally good at forcing you to participate in situations where you have to dice roll against his high reward options. So of course we have something like Slayer's K-Mappa. Everyone kind of knows that this is like one of the problematic moves. This is the default of Slayer's neutral. If he spaces it out, it actually is plus on block, which is really insane to deal with. And this basically forces you to either back up as a defender outside of its range, meaning you are putting yourself in the corner. If you're cornered, it's easier to hit you. That just makes sense. It's easier to get wall broken, yada, yada, yada. Or you have to approach Slayer, right? You have to put yourself at a range where K-Mappa is going to be minus instead of plus on block, which means that you are literally approaching the character who kills you. So that's not a good thing. But more than just K-Mappa, I think what is very underrated about this character is actually P-Mappa. In my opinion, P-Mappa is one of, if not literally his best move. Maybe it's 2H, I'm not really sure. P-Mappa is insane. So first of all, it's forward advancing just like K-Mappa is, and it's -1 on block. Having a -1 on block special cancel is absurd. So because it's a special, that means you can cancel into it from literally any of your moves, right? From something like 5H, you can do P-Mappa. From 2D, you can do P-Mappa. Even from 2H, you can do P-Mappa. And what this means is that Slayer can basically make all of his moves be -1 on block if he wants to, right? Obviously, there is some spacing issues where, like, max range P-Mappa won't always reach the opponent. But overall, I would say that this move will usually connect. So let's take a look at Slayer's corner pressure, right? And his corner pressure is very good because, he has a plus on block close slash, a +4 on block far slash, and all of that is already hard to deal with. But as soon as Slayer pushes himself away from you, which is usually kind of a good thing for yourself, he can end his string in P-Mappa. And ending in P-Mappa is actually insane, because if you look at the spacing we're left at, we're at a range where our 2P, which we have to use a fast option because he's only -1, right? We don't really have frame advantage to work with. Our 2P barely reaches, and it won't really, it's not able to convert into much, right? For at least most characters. So instead, you're usually forced to use something like a 2K, because 2Ks will combo into 2Ds, and those usually work from further away. But anyone who knows how Slayer works probably already knows where I'm going with this. The problem with using a low-hitting poke here is that you leave yourself susceptible to his 2H, which is a frame 5 low-invul move that is very good at low crushing, and it does a lot of damage on counter hit. It even breaks the wall on normal hit, as you just saw there, because it combos into Bile Bunker. And this is insane. You know, you actually have to participate in this situation every time you block P-Mappa. And what's important is that every block string can go into P-Mappa. So even if I set Kai to just block here, right, the important thing is that this constantly will just keep looping into itself. So you do close slash, far slash, 2H, Mappa punch. And then from that situation, the opponent has to guess, are you going to do 2H? If you do 2H, you can just do, you know, P-Mappa again. And obviously this leaves you a little bit closer. It's not literally just loopable per se, but it's just the idea that every time you get to the situation, you have to guess. And the Slayer is not committing anything. There's very little commitment on the Slayer's part. Meanwhile, on your part, you have to use, this is very important, you have to use very low reward, high risk options every time you fight Slayer. It's not just that Slayer's reward in these situations is high, it's that he's not taking much risk even when he does them. So, you know, if you look at things statistically, he's just favored to win in most of these situations, and he's so good at forcing these types of situations the entire game. I used P-Mappa as kind of the example for this just because it's the easiest, but he has a lot of other moves that force very similar situations, and again, he has very easy access to them. So things like his dandy follow-ups, right? The dandy follow-ups are safe on block, they're -2. So the low is -2, and the overhead is also, I believe, -2. And the thing about these is they just leave you spaced out from the opponent. To this, you know, the same effect where you can mix things up with doing like 2H or doing, you know, dandy step or whatever it is, and just kind of keep looping the same situation over and over until the opponent happens to guess right with a low reward option. And every time they're guessing with a low reward option, they're risking, you know, upwards to 50% of their health bar. Now, I know you're probably thinking, what if you use like a mid-hitting button after these minus unblock situations instead of hitting a low-hitting move? Well, the problem with that is that Slayer also has really good options like his 2P or his 5K, or things like Dandy that can either just stuff your buttons or make your buttons whiff. So for example, if we try to press far slash here as Kai, we're going to get hit by his 2P, which will link into 5K, which goes back into a knockdown. Slayer has incredible normals, like pretty much all of his normals are incredible, and specifically they're very good at RPSing. And they can constantly put you in these situations where you have to continue to RPS with a character who is favored to RPS by both having better options than you and also having better reward than you. And the problem with this all really comes down to the fact that you can't really avoid these situations. Almost everything Slayer does will result in some type of scenario like this. So typically, Slayer is a character who actually really benefits from making the game kind of messier, you know? He's not a character where you can really play perfect against him. And because he has so much health, and the fact that you have to use generally low reward options to deal with the things that he does, it means that they can kind of just keep leaning on these types of things, and they'll probably win eventually, just purely based on numbers. Part of the problem with Slayer 2 is that he gets very high reward in ways that I think people don't usually mention. So if you look at like a basic thing Slayer players will do is they'll do stuff like this type of combo, right? And that's like a very basic type of Slayer combo. And the reason why this is actually absurdly good is because it lets you set up tons of different mix-up options. His OP is actually absurd off a lot of these types of hits, because you can do stuff like OTG close slash into either a left-right, which you can change depending on when you do the dash cancel from the OTG. So he gets left-rights and other similar very, very high reward mix-ups off a lot of his different types of combos, right? Even just something like something simple like a 2K2D, usually not really rewarding for most characters, right? And for Slayer, he doesn't get a combo necessarily from it, but he gets to, again, force this situation where it's a left-right that goes back into itself. So this scenario is really good, and specifically Slayer is mixing you up with a close slash. Usually characters are mixing you up with things that are worse combo starters. Slayer is mixing you up with his best combo starter that he has access to. So really the problem with Slayer is ease of access to things. They're not hard to do, and he's able to put himself in scenarios where he can get his high reward hits very consistently. He is able to force RPS situations very consistently that are very favorable to him. And the problem really comes down to the fact that he doesn't have any downsides that really justify all of the strengths that he has. His neutral is actually really good because he has fantastic buttons in his 5K, in his 2D, in his 2H. All of his buttons are honestly anomalies in terms of what types of buttons they are. They're exceedingly good at the things that they do. And his movement isn't really bad. His forward movement is actually pretty good. He has P Mappa and K Mappa to be able to move forward across the screen. His backwards movement is the only thing that's bad about him, but that's not really that important of a thing to have in this game, especially when you have such good defensive buttons such as his 2K, 5K, 2P, all those types of things. Now, a big thing with this character I want to stress, and I see people kind of get this wrong about him, he's not a character that lacks counterplay. There are things you can do against the character, right? There's never a situation where you're literally bereft of options, right? You can always do something. And I feel oftentimes people kind of conflate that with the character has counterplay, so they clearly can't be that good. If you look at some other characters again like Asuka or Happy Cows, for example, there's more situations against those characters where you can basically just feel hopeless depending on how the situation's played out. Whereas with Slayer, that's not really the case, right? Slayer's whole thing is the fact that you technically could always try to do something against him. The problem is, even though you have options, they're so disadvantageous for you that it doesn't really matter that you have them, because you can pick correctly, frankly, so much more often than the Slayer player does and still lose just because of the statistics of the situation. It's not that you don't have options, it's that your options almost always suck, and you are very frequently put into situations that suck. But anyways, that's going to be my thoughts on Slayer. Currently, I do think he is actually the best character in the game because of the reasons I just explained. I think characters like this are very hard to play around because, even when you're right, it doesn't really feel that meaningful. Meanwhile, when you're wrong, it could just mean the entire round is over for you. So he's at least top tier somewhere. I personally think he's the best character, but again, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think the Slayer is super good right now? Do you think he's top 1? Do you think he's top 5? Let me know what you think down below. I personally am very curious to see what they're going to do with this character in Season 4, because as I mentioned, this is a character that he's showing a win rate that is frankly absurd. He's winning at all skill levels by a pretty considerable amount, and a lot of people are complaining about him. So on a lot of metrics, there's a lot of reasons why Arxis will probably nerf him, but I'm kind of curious what direction they're going to take him in, because he's kind of hard to balance in his current state, I think. Anyways, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.